As the secular myth disintegrates around us, and many of us find our sense of meaning and belonging threatened, there has been a rise in a certain practice to search for spiritual encounters and elevated consciousness. Though around for hundreds of years, psychedelics have been breaking into the mainstream as we enter the post-secular age. Some users of psychedelics report elation and spiritual experiences, journeys of self-knowledge and discovery, and realms that are more real than normal reality. However, there is also a dark side to the substance, one that reveals the unbearable weight of expanded consciousness and forbidden knowledge, and that we might not be as in control of our existence as we would like to be. Visionary sci-fi director Alex Garland has described his 2018 film Annihilation as, quote, a journey from suburbia to psychedelia. When you view the trippy movie through this lens, it pulls in all the implications that psychedelics have for the post-secular age. What does Annihilation reveal about the use of psychedelics for meaning-making? And what does it also have to say about our current cultural climate that might lead some to view psychedelics as transcendent spiritual encounters? Are they? Well, let's explore that. Welcome to Analysis with Alex, your online media and literature classroom. My wife Grace joins me during this series to bring her background in sociology to our analysis of films and events that explore the emerging post-secular age.
First, we need to understand why people want to trip in the first place, and we want to start this section with the same caveat we gave about the myth of secularism in the first video of this series. We are going to make some general claims here that don't gather every bit of nuance, but on a large scale, this is how some of the cultural shifts have occurred. Mainly, we want to understand the context of why we are witnessing a rise in psychedelic usage again. Psychedelics haven't always been used so that you could learn the subliminal messaging of a Pink Floyd record or transform a laser show into a transcendent experience. Psychedelics and spiritual practices have a long history dating back to ancient civilizations. Some notable records show that in ancient Greece, oracles, namely the Oracle of Delphi, tripped on natural gases that the temple was built over, thus possibly leading to the visions she gave visitors. There has also been ethnographic data that shows that ancient Mesoamerican cultures, such as the Mayans, used psychedelic substances in therapeutic and religious rituals, including spiritual healing, wisdom gain, and religious ceremonies. Other ancient world religions, including the Abrahamic religions, tend to steer clear of psychedelic usage, though there have been some historical exceptions to that, such as datura seeds being recorded in different Buddhist and Hindu scriptures. Given how the Abrahamic religions of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam went on to inform a large portion of the world's philosophies and ethics, psychedelics were broadly out of the picture with these close ties to pagan religions and other forms of sorcery. Spiritual encounters and experiences were conducted and provided in the various channels these religions offered, and to a degree slowly eroded with the rise of the Enlightenment philosophies we explored in our first video. In short, with the advancement of Enlightenment ideas, spiritual encounters were given less and less credence, and there became a general disconnect with spirituality altogether. Many of these ideas also entered religious communities, which in a sense despiritualized a lot of the metaphysical and supernatural aspects of them.
With the rising distrust of these established institutions in the 1960s, psychedelics were viewed as a method of taking spirituality as a self-focused journey into your own hands. Over the next few decades, psychedelic philosophers such as Terence McKenna garnered serious attention and informed a lot of ideas found in different subcultures counter to the established institutions of the Enlightenment era. Here is an example of how, in general, a lot of thinking towards psychedelic consumption in a spiritual context goes, taken from McKenna's book, Food of the Gods, The Search for the Original Tree of Knowledge, A Radical History of Plants, Drugs, and Human Evolution. Quote, "What I think happened is that in the world of prehistory, all religion was experiential, and it was based on the pursuit of ecstasy through plants. At some point, very early, a group interposed itself between people and direct experience of the other. This created hierarchies, priesthoods, theological systems, caste, ritual, taboos. Shamanism, on the other hand, is an experiential science that deals with an area where we know nothing. It is important to remember that our epistemological tools have developed very unevenly in the West. We know a tremendous amount about what is going on in the heart of the atom, but we know absolutely nothing about the nature of the mind." End quote. This sort of thinking is still the reason today we see an increased interest in psychedelics. Arguably, Joe Rogan has had one of the most significant influences in making psychedelics in this context mainstream, especially his choice of DMT, which is why gym bros may now feature tattoos of aliens and psychedelic imagery and such with highly religious implications in the visuals. Popular influencers and media outlets that may want to appear rebellious, radical, and as if they are breaking the spiritual mold set by previous institutions may also gravitate towards exploring psychedelics intertwined with spirituality. Vice Media is a great example, as it has multiple series on the subject matter. All of this is to say, there's a general trend of psychedelic culture and philosophy being seen as a way to combat the overall distrust and disillusionment in Western guiding narratives of religion and meaning making. There are certainly other reasons why people get into psychedelics, such as crafting a sort of adventure narrative around it or purely recreational use. In the end, there is a draw to them because they make people feel something when other options that were presented in the past have been contaminated by superficiality or viewed as lacking a real purpose. With this specific understanding around psychedelics as a method for meaning making and spirituality, let's turn to 2018's Annihilation and see what it explores about this trend.
Annihilation's setting of middle to upper class suburbia is rather bleak. Literally, its color palette is drab, often using the neutral colors. This set design itself is often stale and sterile. There's something ironically clinical about the cinematography before Lena encounters the shimmer. In addition, Garland and his crew use lighting to evoke a certain mood and theme regarding posh suburban life. Most shots depicting this portion of the story are backlit, which makes the shot feel down and somber. This type of lighting places the characters in the shadow of the setting, hinting that these characters are lost, wandering in the darkness of their comfortable lifestyles and status.
The overall dissatisfaction with this lifestyle leads to a central tension explored towards the film's climax as we learn that Lena had an affair on her lower class military career husband Kane with her upper class academia career colleague Daniel. This affair is ultimately revealed to be based on meaningless sex, though. It's almost entirely focused on superficial status symbols, as one of the justifications for it presented by Daniel is that Kane can't understand Lena's work and interest. There's another subtle nod to the difference via prompts during a flashback where Lena reads a large book and Kane sticks with a magazine while they relax. This superficial hedonistic act leads to destruction for everyone involved. It's even suggested at one point that Kane learns about the affair, and it is probably why he agrees to undergo the mission that enters the Shimmer to begin with.
In addition to the film's cinematography, lighting, and other depictions of the class divide fueling a dissatisfying and meaningless suburban life, there are hints of a general distrust in established institutions for our characters. In another flashback sequence, Lena makes the comment that God makes mistakes. At the core of the sentiment, there is a distrust of religion. However, we can also see that Lena's hopes in science and academia have also left her unfulfilled. In addition, Kane and Lena mock the United States government and military institutions during this scene, so we get the full ringer of post-secular distrust in institutions in one big swoop with Annihilation. At the center of Annihilation is the Shimmer and its role as a psychedelic revelation for its characters. The Shimmer is flooded with light compared to the rest of Annihilation's reality. This choice helps create a sense of what the characters are encountering is all the more real than the shadows that they once lived in. It's also inviting in terms of color scheme. The Shimmer is overwhelmingly green and vibrant with flowers rather than the sterile hallways and mute colors of the outside world. The soundtrack reinforces this natural feeling the Shimmer emits through simple guitar pieces, but it also hints at the Shimmer's mythic nature through swelling strings. All these creative decisions let Garland and his crew present the Shimmer as a psychedelic revelation through formal filmmaking techniques. But Annihilation's plot and character development also frame the Shimmer as a transcendent, revelatory experience. And perhaps it acts as a warning for those searching to expand consciousness and obtain revelations on their own accord.
To some degree, each character that enters the Shimmer experiences a revelation based on a conversation between Lena and Cass. It's something each character is aware of, but they haven't been thrust into a spiritual or psychological experience that forces them to face their decisions and reality as the Shimmer does. However, they all willingly go into the Shimmer, aware that they will most likely not return. In this sense, Annihilation frames these characters willingly undergoing a psychedelic experience, but the outcome perhaps they weren't prepared for. As the film states it, quote, "Going into the Shimmer is not something you do when your life is in order," end quote. Each character has some form of disconnect, disillusionment, and dissatisfaction. They're all searching for something, and the Shimmer reveals something about everyone over the course of their journey. Or maybe we should just call it their trip. Whether it is unchecked emotions or desperation for meaning, the end results of the trip are not good, as each character is either killed by life forms in the Shimmer or literally succumbs to its power. Annihilation proposes an interesting question to the viewer. Is this suicide, or are the characters engaged in self-destruction? Vetris argues that self-destruction is literally coded into humans. Therefore, given that the Shimmer reveals some greater reality that our disconnected suburban lives block out, of course, they would all be destroyed at some point, returning to the great forces in the cosmos they are visiting. The disconnection to a greater reality, or perhaps a greater being, is too much for each character, all of whom have been so far removed from the idea of such a possibility.
The mutations found in the Shimmer reflect this idea of one massive organism that we all share to some degree. This framing arguably leads to an environmentalist reading of Annihilation too. However, the movie draws from its opening to show a further disconnect from a potential higher power or higher plane of existence. The Shimmer's effect of infecting each person that enters it is considered a parallel with Lena's work with cancer, describing the Shimmer's power like tumors. In one sense, there is a small amount of guilt for what we've done to the environment, but there is no real connection. The same could be said for these characters in regards to an amount of guilt for not taking advantage of meaning making and searching for higher purposes, as each tries to cling to a perspective that avoids tackling the questions and issues at hand. For example, Lena continuously views everything in the Shimmer through a biological lens. This perspective allows her to have a separatist approach to the guilt she feels and avoid the sense of unity the Shimmer thrives on. The film's conclusion explores what happens when we attempt to cling to these views when confronted with higher consciousness, though. It is fitting that Annihilation places its conclusion in the symbol of enlightenment and guidance through darkness, a lighthouse. This choice symbolically codes the scenes that occur within the lighthouse as a peak of expanded consciousness while we view the Shimmer as a psychedelic trip. The film then showcases how three different characters interact and conclude their journey to expanded consciousness, which is all destructive and dire. Vetris succumbs to its power and obliterates herself due to its unbearable weight. She plays into her own self-fulfilling prophecy that self-destruction is the thing all humans share deep inside. However, Kane and Lena experience other outcomes. Kane seems to take on the weight of his revelations brought to him, though he is unable to fully take them on. He interacts with the being and strives to share his consciousness with it. He perhaps believes he is engaging with something that has always been a part of him, and to obliterate himself now that they are merged brings out some higher being. Though this is revealed over the course of the movie not to be the case, Kane, as Lena and we know him, is obliterated, and only the being moves on. The weight of expanded consciousness is too much for Kane, which leaves Lena's interesting interactions with the strange being. Lena notices the destructive nature on taking on the expanded consciousness the alien offers and eventually denies it. The film frames this moment as a kind of dance of mimicry that Lena conducts with the being. Despite how the being is unable to replicate Lena's movements, seemingly possessing a sort of all-knowing behavior intertwined with Lena's being, it's still Lena who gets to make the active decision of free will, in the end, to reject the being and herself merging as it did with other characters. She declines the invitation, so to speak. She's aware of the danger of engaging with it further. She's able to walk away from the Shimmer.
However, it's questionable if she does so safely and soundly. Annihilation is a bit ambiguous about the well-being of Lena and its conclusion. When asked if she can describe the being's form, she is unable to, and rather struggles to communicate and move on from the thing she has witnessed. To continue with the psychedelics metaphor, she has experienced expanded consciousness, but can't move past and accept what this experience instilled in her. Given the film places her back into a dark, sterile setting, we get the feeling she perhaps feels darkness about it. The cinematography builds a bleak atmosphere. Annihilation tips into a cosmicism reading here. Cosmicism, sometimes called cosmic horror, is a literary philosophy popularized by the writer H.P. Lovecraft, in which human existence is particularly insignificant in the larger scheme of intergalactic existence. There is a cosmic void that imposes existential helplessness on people. Annihilation taps into this literary tradition, and in turn, it easily transforms into a focused form of nihilism. However, I think we can view Annihilation as a cautionary tale. What happens when humans devise ways to explore forbidden knowledge? What does it do to someone to grasp consciousness and experiences not gifted to or coded into us? Annihilation's answers all end in destruction and death in one form or another. If anything, the movie perhaps wants us to closely consider what cosmic powers we may be dealing with when we desire to grasp these things in the spiritually removed, sterile, and safe environments of our suburban homes. It asks, why trip? Thank you for watching this video. Please let me know in the comments if you felt the same way about Annihilation. This is my interpretation, and perhaps you got something different from the film, maybe something else with its engagement with cosmicism. I would like to know, so feel free to discuss it in the comments below. If you enjoy content like this, as well as in-depth book reviews, then please subscribe to this channel to join up for future explorations. There are more video essays in the works. Again, thank you for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in future explorations.